Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Got a great show ahead, folks, today. I teased you yesterday that we would talk about ghost stories, the paranormal, and more in shorter form today. That's exactly what we're going to do with our guest, Gail Galotta. Let me tell you a little bit about her and her project. But first, let me tell you about her, and we'll bring her in. She was raised in Chicago. Gail Galotta spent her childhood summers in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a beautiful part of the country. I'm very fond of that part of the country, where her love of water and its quiet, mystical pull took root. Lakes frequently appears in her works, especially the one we'll talk about today, reflecting a lifelong fascination shaped by long days at her grandparents' cottage. She's a former high school English teacher. Gail has directed school and community theater productions and written numerous plays and essays. Her fiction, poetry, and nonfiction have earned multiple writing awards, including recognition from the Upper Peninsula Writers Association, which named her Emerging New Writer of the Year in 2008. She also spent 9 years as a weekly columnist for the Iron Mountain Daily News and is the author of Views from My Boathouse. Gail lives in Vulcan, Michigan with her husband and their dog. We love dogs and animals on this program. In fact, I'm going to ask her a little bit about potographs for pooches and if she's ever been to the Michigan event out there. And overlooks that same lake that inspired her earliest stories. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk today about her latest one, which I got the pleasure of reading and absolutely enjoyed. We have a link in the description of this program. I'm going to push you guys over there to go get this book. It's called Voices Carry Here, Supernatural Stories of Ghosts, Mystery, and Suspense. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome into Darkness Radio, Gail Galotta. Hi, Gail. How are you?
Oh, I am great. And what an impressive introduction. Are you sure that's me?
That is you, Gail. Yes, that is you. Let's start it out. And I know it's kind of cliche, but let's start out talking a little bit about you first and talk a little bit about your exposure to the supernatural and what got you your fire stoked for this particular part of life.
Well, that's a real loaded question there, Tim, because my interest in the supernatural, I think like a lot of people who are interested in it, started in my childhood when I had things happen to me that being a child, I just more or less accepted. But as you get older and you realize there's a difference between the real world and the fantasy world, I think sometimes you just let go of those strange things and say, well, that isn't possible. But then later in life, particularly when I started doing a lot of writing, it would creep into my writing. I will give a little anecdote here about that.
Yeah.
When I first submitted short stories to Mission Point Press for publication, the editor that I ultimately had there said, really, you should have one theme with your entire book, presenting those short stories. And they were a little all over the place. Some were comedy, romance, whatever. I didn't even realize, Tim, it's strange to say, but the majority of the stories had supernatural elements. And so what I'm kind of saying here is, I think that's always been in me. And I can look back and think, I actually have seen ghosts. And it's not exactly pushing it back in my subconscious, but in more recent years, these, I won't call them necessarily talents, but whatever, I've had more experiences. And that has gone into this book. Voices Carry Here is not entirely based on experience, but it's certainly inspired by things that have happened to me and also happened to me with my sisters, because we've had some pretty weird situations, whether traveling or even being on this lake. So certainly my family, when they look at these stories, go, oh, I know what that's about. And so maybe some thinly disguised experiences I've had in these stories, at least for those who know me. So that's kind of the overall picture of, my experience going into my writing.
I want to talk about the generalities around the stories today, Gail, not necessarily the stories themselves, because the subjects you've picked here are so incredibly fascinating. They live outside the norm of what we talk about when we talk supernatural. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're right in the wheelhouse when we talk about ghosts and in the afterlife and even near-death experiences and whatnot. But you come up with some fascinating topics that to me kind of grab me right by the throat and suck me in. I want to talk. The first thing I want to talk about, which really grabbed me, there's a scenario in the book where there's a man who works as an auto mechanic. This is the first one I want to talk about today because this is the thing I think that reaches into our psyche, and it's your book has a very Twilight Zone feel to it, which I loved. You know?
Oh, I grew up watching it. I can see that.
Yeah,
the story you're talking about, any combination wins in the carnival?
Yeah, let me ask you this. Okay, so I brought up Twilight Zone, I think, for a reason, and I want you to expound on this for a quick second. How much Twilight Zone did you watch growing up, and did Rod Serling have an effect on the way you write?
Well, I don't know so much about the way I write, but certainly he had an effect on me in other ways, because I remember watching that show as a young child. And it was so different than anything else that you would see on TV. I mean, I'm a huge I Love Lucy fan, but I grew up watching her reruns, still love her to this day. But this wasn't a situation comedy. This wasn't even a detective show. It was way out of any experience we've ever had. And we kids found it terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think now when I look back, the reason it is number one, he's dealing with situations we didn't talk about, we didn't know about, the last man on Earth or aliens coming down. We didn't really, not back then. But the other thing is the imagination, the places that he would take you in that whatever 22-minute show. And that influenced me. And I like to take my readers to a place that can be frightening. It can be familiar. There always, I think, has to be some shred of credibility there with the reader or with the viewer, if it's a television show or movie, that, yeah, I know this is possible. I can feel that it's possible. In the case of some of these stories, I experienced what some of the characters have experienced. I might put it in a different scenario, different character. But I believe that if you have certain tendencies toward being not necessarily psychic, maybe supernatural, that you believe in this, it's because that is also a part of a reality, a different reality. Just as Rod Serling would say, in his introduction to the Twilight Zone, there are things outside of us. Maybe a lot of people don't reach that far beyond their normal everyday selves, but there is. I remember, I'm not told this very often. When I was a little girl, I could do something I thought was very strange, but it also was very rewarding for me. I would lie in bed and concentrate very hard, and I could take myself out of my body.
Oh, wow.
And in the atmosphere, whatever, and I was aware that, and it was difficult to do. It was a concentration, and I was a little girl. And years later, I guess I brought it up to my dad, and my dad had the same experiences.
Really?
So perhaps there is something being said that certain abilities can come through genetically or whatever. And then I saw a ghost when I was I 11? Something like 11 years old here. Didn't tell anyone but my sister, who knows everything in the world about me. And I kind of buried that away as I got older, thinking, well, there's some logical explanation for it. Mm-hmm. And then as an adult, decades later, same thing. same place.
Wow.
There are things out there that if we don't open ourselves up to them, if we don't reach beyond logic, we won't know them. And I try to touch upon that in my stories. Open up your mind and accept this. Even some of the characters in Voices Carry here, they are not accepting.
Right.
But the reader is thinking, yeah, I know what's going on here. This is happening. This is real. So it's that Twilight Zone. Believe that there's something beyond your everyday life, the things that you see with your five senses.
Well, much like Serling, you have this gift of being able to, I think, reach into not only people's greatest fears, but their greatest recognitions, and being able to get on people's levels and being able to relate to them in a heartbeat. I mean, you're able to pick up and grab somebody from the first couple of sentences of a story and suck them in and not only grab their attention, but maintain it and be able to establish people's recognition of characters immediately and make them want to know this character and sympathize, empathize, and want to take that journey with them. And then immediately go, maybe that's not what you should be doing. Or, you want to root for the character that's there. And immediately you're on that short journey. And then at the end of the story, you're like, wait, what happened to him? Right? The story is too short. Right. And that's kind of the way I felt at the end of every story. Like, why didn't it continue?
Well, maybe the next book, but
that's what
I like that too.
That's what Serling did with the Twilight Zone. He left us wanting more, which is exactly how it should be.
But you're still thinking, right, Tim? I mean, you're still thinking about that possibility and the different options. That anything is possible, and I like to create characters that seem so real. They have things in common with you. They also could be people that you know. And so you're accepting and getting into that character's journey, and it becomes your journey too.
Yeah.
So the things that happen to him are happening to you at the same time. And I hope that comes off the way I wanted it to. And I hope that the situations that I created are enjoyable. I don't write horror per se,
right?
But there are some scenes in here, you know what I'm talking about, that were actually challenging to write because there's violence. And, but that's also part of it. That's part of that world out there that we don't know what can happen. That idea that, you're an adult now, but when the lights are out, there could be something under your bed. Maybe, like you're jumping from the door onto your bed because you heard a sound. Is something going to grab you under there? There's always that edge of tension in that which doesn't seem quite normal, quite logical. Right, so that's what I'm going for.
Exactly. And I think the reason our audience is going to love this book so much as it is that, again, the original name of the show, Darkness on the Edge of Town, this is exactly what this book is. It's that darkness on the edge of town. It's that veil there that you're afraid to pierce, but you're going into it anyways, and you don't know what the exact outcome is going to be. I started down that road of this story that I wanted to talk about, this particular story of this auto mechanic who, as he starts out life, or as we get to that intersection with him.
Come into it, sure.
He's got a girlfriend who he's about to marry. She's pregnant, and he's in an absolute state of morose. He doesn't know that he wants to marry her. He doesn't know how he got here. It's very much the David Byrne situation of Days Gone By. And he's just kind of wishing he didn't put himself in the situation. And they're at a midway at a carnival.
Yeah.
And he's, she's telling him, well, there's this apartment. And again, I don't want to give away the whole story, but the idea is he runs across a carnival barker that tells him there's this game. And, if you got to pick 3 winners, and there's 12 horses that are running, and you've got to pick 3 winners, and then, it's luck, luck and fate. Pick 3 winners. And essentially this is based on psychic ability and picking and choosing your luck and changing your fate. And he says, maybe you can make a wish and change your fate. And his whole thing is, I just wish I could get out of my situation.
Well, he does, but not the way he wants.
Right.
Yes.
And this is very Rod Serling-like, Gail. I mean, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And this magical carnival barker, all of a sudden.
Yeah, he's something else. Yeah. He's taking him somewhere else. That's a journey. That's a journey that story I really took to heart for a long time. And, I think this is true of a lot of writers. I know these characters. They're inside of me. They speak to me. They're telling me what they're going to say and what they're going to do. And sometimes I'm just this instrument. I'm afraid of that carnival barker, but he's still inside me, and I have sympathy for some characters. It's interesting. You're creating a world, just like Rod Serling did. You're creating a world out here, and you're in a sense, you're selling it. Do you believe this? Do you want to be there? Have you entered it and are afraid to leave? So yeah, on the edge, that darkness on the edge of town. Even the ones that are softer in characters, you have a lot of sympathy. And I'm also thinking about the one where the man is having premonitions. I've had those. I've had those since I was a child, and they're frightening. And they're not even controllable. So there's that part in that man. Not simple fears, but maybe common fears. Your children getting lost. The dangers that are out there. When I put together Voices Carry here, I think it takes you, the stories take you all over these places of darkness. Some of them bring you back into the light, but some of them, when you close the book, you're still there.
As far as the character, the carnival barker, I thought to myself, I could read an entire book of those types of stories where people approach this man wanting to change their fate, wanting to change their circumstances. And here's this man who says, step up and I'll give you a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
any combination wins. Yes.
Right. Any combination wins. Mm-hmm. And I thought, my God, how devious. But it could
and
go
yet,
good. It
that's
could go
a
bad.
human. Isn't that a human longing we have? You can have a happy life, but aren't there times in your life where you wish you could get out of this situation, out of this relationship? And what if there was some little magic put out there in front of you, dangling in front of you, and you innocently took it? It's kind of the pact you might make with the devil. That old storyline, be careful what you wish for.
And wouldn't that be
and
something
who you wish it with.
If that character was some sort of Mephistopheles or
maybe
or Faustian type deal where he was making the bargain that ends up trapping him in the end anyways.
Yes.
Where he ends up being right back in the circumstance with her anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And that's what's wonderful about those types of stories. And again, I'm going to encourage you folks to go get this book. There's a link in the description of the program for Voices Carry Here. Because you read this story and you think there's 1,000 different ways I could go with this story, even at the end of it. And it's kind of one of those, you remember the old Choose Your Own Adventures where you're just like, I could, the places we could go, that make you marvel and wonder and think, it's just, you've titillated the mind, I think, with that particular story. It's
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's brilliant. But it's a tale maybe as old as time too.
I think the premise of it is, and people can relate to that, even if it's just a fear, that they have. I better not, that caution. But, one of the things that I was hoping is that people would never walk through a carnival and look at the barkers the same way again. How about that? Be careful.
Right. When we come back, I want to talk about the innocence of babes. There's that fear. We'll talk about that when we come back. And you talked a little bit about premonition. We'll talk.
Okay.
We'll expound a little bit on that topic as well. And we'll talk about some other things too. There's also a story about the place you live and the innocence of the place you live being corrupted. That seems to come up a lot in this. And then I want to talk about the innocence being corrupted runs through a lot of your stories. The security of where you are, I think, being corrupted it's a theme that runs through a lot of your stories. So I want to talk about that as well. And I understand. I can understand that probably comes from a trauma-based life or trauma being thrown at you throughout your life. So we'll talk about that when we come back as well, Gail. The stories are really rich here, folks. I really do encourage you to get this book. Gail Galotta is our guest. The book is Voices Carry Here: Supernatural Stories of Ghosts, Mystery, and Suspense. I highly encourage you to go get this book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a quick read, folks. It's not a short book by any means, but the short stories keep you wanting more. You keep wanting to advance further in the book and find out what story's next, because you read one and you're like, oh, I gotta read the next one. I gotta read the next one, because
thank you.
the cliffhangers keep you wanting to keep digesting the book. So Gail's done a phenomenal job with this book. So I encourage you during the break, folks, go pick up a copy. When we come back, we'll talk to Gail about the false sense of security and why we live with that false sense of security from day to day. Are we a more transient people than we think we are? Are we really a more insular people than we think we are? Are we really meant to be more alone than what we are? We'll talk about that with Gail when we come back next here on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. But first, folks, I forgot to mention, we have a sponsor today, Jelly Bean and Julia's. You're coming up upon the weekend. You gotta have your spot, right? You gotta play a place where you need to go. I almost said where everybody knows your name. Of course, everybody knows your name at Jelly Bean and Julia's. They're like family, but you gotta go somewhere where you're gonna get a great meal. Tonight is happy hour, 25% off all appetizers, including the appetizer sampler, half price single pour well drinks, half price Michelob Golden Light, Coors Light taps, and half price domestic cans and bottles. That's tonight only at Jelly Bean and Julia's. Then, of course, on Friday, the smoked prime rib dinner. I've been raving about it for weeks. You've got to go get it. The 14 or 16 ounce smoked prime rib dinner. It's the tequila berry salad. Of course, that sweet tangy dressing with the croutons, the bacon bits. Oh, folks, that salad, I'm telling you. And then the Boston baked potato is with it. The Texas toast. Everything together is an amazing meal. It's probably going to be one of the top 5 meals you've ever had in your life. And of course, at a nominal price. It's a wonderful price, folks. That smoked prime rib, by the way, folks, is smoked for, I'm trying to remember how many hours. I think it's something like 14 or 16 hours or something like that. But it is wonderful. They start serving it at 4:30 in the afternoon. They serve it until it's gone. I'll tell you right now, get there early because you want to be able to get it. People start rushing the restaurant at 4:30. So you want to get there so that you can get your serving of that smoked prime rib dinner on Friday. Sunday, of course, breakfast on Sundays only. So make sure that you get there. The chicken and waffles alone at Jelly Bean and Julia's are well worth it. So there you go. Jelly Bean and Julia's in Coon Rapids on Coon Rapids Boulevard. Once you're there, your family, go tell Corey and Coley that Darkness Radio says hi, and they'll set you up. There you go. All right, when we come back, more with Gail Galotta. Voices Carry Here is the name of the book. Supernatural Stories of Ghosts, Mysteries, and Suspense. When we come back, we'll talk about whether we're meant to be an insular people. Next on Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is Gail Galotta. Name of the book is Voices Carry Here, Supernatural Stories of Ghosts, Mysteries, and Suspense. And when we last left you, we were talking about the fact that trauma runs through a lot of this book. Trauma of not just things that are done to people, but things that... What's a good way of putting this, Gail? Events that happen to people, people doing things unto people, not just violent acts, but events that happen to people as well. And it seems like these things happen because of a malice or it's a good way of putting this. It builds up over time. It's like a friction, right? And it seems like when we're insular, when we're by ourselves, there's a calm or a peace to ourselves, right? It's only when we rub up against each other that these ill will or these feelings start to happen. And we take it out on each other. Are we meant to be an insular people?
I don't think so. And as you're kind of describing that, certainly I have those experiences, and a lot of what I wrote about are things that happened to me or I've observed with other people in other relationships. And yeah, we do also work off each other's emotions and experiences. You know, I can think of a couple of the stories in the book that people are haunted by the past, or the past is haunting them. In the Pestilence house, for example.
Yes, that's a good example.
It's a brand new setting. No one had ever built there. And yet there are people there, you know, from years ago. And this story is very much based on what happened to me as well. You know, my home. I'm from Chicago.
Okay.
However, when we moved here, we didn't know, as I say in the book, every place has a history. And sometimes that history is with people you didn't even know. And of course, in that story, the character gets to know them in a very frightening way. So yeah, what would be the solution if we were just insulated from people, if we closed ourselves off from our past and from those that might bring that up? You know, what's the price of that then?
True, but you know, there's a scary saying out there, and I think about this sometimes, and I wonder, you know, what does it all mean? You know, somebody once forcefully said to me, "You're only 100 a year. You're only 100 years after you die away from being obsolete, no matter how much of an impact you make on this world."
Yeah. Well, the last person who leaves the earth that remembered you, then the saying is, you are only remembered as long as the last person who knew you is still here to remember you. And yet, I think, especially in a couple of my stories, I show that spirits can return to be recognized, as in the Pestilence house. That's what they want. Mm-hmm. Is there evil? Are they evil? You were talking about malice. Yeah, I think so. But I try to leave some of those things up to the reader, too. And in the other story about the babysitter and the little girl and the little boy, can children be evil?
That's where I wanted to go next. You tell a chilling tale, and again, we'll leave a lot of it for the book, but you tell a chilling tale of two children, and we won't tell which one's which, where it seems like there's a bit of evil even in the child.
Yes.
Where they have a penchant for fire, where they seem to want to cause trouble, where they seem to want to get in trouble, where they they're almost plotting to do harm to people.
That is a very disturbing thought that I had to deal with when I wrote that. And yet I think the story wouldn't work if there isn't some credibility in that. Not necessarily, there are some other questions that came up. Can a child be born with this sense of doing things that are evil? Or are there influences upon a child that might be weaker or more susceptible to whatever might be offered in lieu of favors that this evil force might be putting upon them? I mean, there are a lot of ways to look at this. I try not to direct the reader to one assumption,
right.
and leave that open. And I believe that also makes it more credible. Well, it could be this, it could be that, and yet disturbing. But yeah, and it's because this is about children, I think that makes it even more disturbing. We don't want to think that way. I mean, I'm a mom and a grandma of the most wonderful children in the world, of course. So how could children do anything that is terrible? And yet that picks away at our fears, that something innocent. One of my favorite movies, it's an old movie from the 50s, is called The Bad Seed. Yeah. Patty McCormick plays this beautiful little girl. There is a child, through all appearances on the outside, is perfect. How could she not be? So, but if we start to go a little deeper, where does that evil come from? Yeah.
The intriguing part about the story you wrote is, as you said, there may be an outside force that's causing it. There may not be. It may be completely inside her, but yet the parents enable it. And that's
or ignorant of it.
It's your interpretation.
That's right.
There's things in that story that could suggest both. Especially the mother. The mother, the mother seems like she's got her head buried in the sand, right?
But she's also gone through trauma, and so she's perhaps not wanting to let anything else in her life weigh upon her. As her husband it explains to the babysitter, she just went through this, went through that. And even in the beginning, I posed some questions about what really happened to these people. And, we're all curious about new neighbors who move in, but appearances, especially those first impressions, as I put in there, are not always accurate. Things run deeper. You don't really know people until you really get to know them. And then, you might see things you don't like.
And we can set it up as much as this so that so we're not talking in circles and people go, well, what is it you're talking about? This family moves into this town in which our main character, is it Jessie is her name? Who's the
Jessie, the babysitter.
The babysitter is babysitting for this family. This family is new to town, has moved into town after their home supposedly burned, and that's the story. And a relative of theirs has died in this fire, and that's what we know. And we don't know how this fire has happened and whatnot. But Jessie has a story for the family as to how she heard the fire started, and she brings it up to the family, and they kind of confess as to how it happened, and we'll go as far as that. But this family member is a member of the mother's, and she's quite sensitive about it, and she's the one who confesses to Jessie. So that's kind of why we're kind of talking around things.
Yeah, I don't want to divulge too much, but You're right. People are thinking, what are they talking about?
Yeah. So that's but again, pickup voices carry here to get the entire story, but it's got a chilling ending to it, and you do a very good job of leading us along in the story to figure out, what's going on in the story and where the evil really lies in this story. Boy, we like to think when we look at our own children, right, in our lives, that there's no way my child could be like that.
Of course not. No, no.
But then you see them do certain things and you know that there's the potential.
And I love the moment when the reader realizes what the truth is, the build up to that. And I struggled with how to make that happen because I'm a very nice person, Tim, and not at all violent. And to create violence, this is probably the most violent story in there. It was difficult. I even had a conversation with my editor a couple of years ago on this, who suggested maybe not using some of the harsh things I did, but I had to. I had to go along with my instinct there that this was going to be the kind of story where you're going to think about this after you close the book.
Yeah.
You're going to look over your shoulder. You're going to think twice, when you turn off the lights. This is that kind of a story. Some of them are softer and even sad, and there are children and other stories in the book. Particularly, I think the one about the lost boy, that one really grips your heart. It's spooky, but it's softer.
Yeah.
And those are the children that we readily believe are real, and we don't look further than that. But
right.
I've tried to present it all.
Right. No. Right. I want to say we were talking about trauma in general, and there's a story that I don't know why it resonated with me so much, but I want to talk about, and you talk about trauma. I wanted to get to it, and that's the story about and I don't forgive me for not knowing the exact names of these stories.
Oh, that's okay.
But the story about the husband who disappears. Is it?
Hope. Yeah. And actually, I've got my book open here because I'm thinking, okay, which one is this? Where Hope Lies.
Where Hope Lies.
Kind of a play there on lie. Yeah. That's a very different. Well, they're all different, but this one is far different than the others.
Yeah. And we talk about deception, right? And who you think you really know. And the reason why I started out talking about trauma and whether we really know, and whether we should be an insular people and whether we should extend trust as far as we extend it, is because we do put a lot of times, we talk about faith and we talk about, how much we trust one another. And we do give a lot of times our hearts, our souls, our lives to people, and we lay them. And there are certain faiths we put out there. We put our faith in our God and our Lord. We put our faith in another person. You sometimes you take a vow in front of God and say you're going to put your faith in one other person. You bind yourself to them, and you hope that love stays with that other person, and it's going to be till death do us part, right? That's the idea.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. But you've made that vow, right? And that's a vow that you're supposed to
yes,
Gail, supposed to take incredibly seriously.
Unless she only made that vow to herself. There are a lot of questions raised in that story. And she's a troubled woman. So I think the ending is both satisfying, but also brings up other possibilities. I enjoyed writing that story because a few of them are set in different time periods, old. This is set in the 1950s.
Yes. Yeah.
And the role of a wife was different in the 1950s than it is now. Relationships were different. And this story is not set in a small town or, at a lake, as many of them are. This one is in a city. Mm-hmm. So it's a different story, a different time, and a whole different tone to it.
And what's eerie about it, there's the old joke, the old man went out for cigarettes. He never came back. Right.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I woke up and he was gone.
Right. Or, the old man went out for cigarettes. 5 days later, he came back. And, it turns out he had a family on the other side of town.
And something, yeah. But do you think the policeman even believed her?
No.
Because they didn't act that way either.
And it probably wasn't the first time.
Investigations were different then too. Just maybe they weren't taking it as seriously as perhaps they would now. I don't know, but it's the way she's looked at by the other characters that give us a feeling for her.
Yeah,
I think as much or maybe more than where her thoughts are, because we're not sure where her thoughts. And isn't that the way we look at each other? We put our thoughts and assumptions of, you should be happy or you should be having this nice life. It's getting into those minds. But I like that this is a person that you can't quite figure out for quite a while. You don't know what's going on with her.
It's an incredible portrait of one person who's free falling and then has to survive.
Yeah,
because most
that's
people,
a good way to put it.
Yeah, because most people could collapse or some people could collapse into madness, sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like that's the journey she could potentially go on. But the way she rebounds is pretty amazing. That's why I say it's an interesting portrait that you've put out there, especially for that time period.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I try to establish that early on when she steps over the newspaper and Eisenhower's becoming president. At least that gives it some time frame there, because I want the reader to know she's putting on the hat and gloves to walk to town. This is a different time.
Yeah.
And then in another story, you have a woman who loves and she's young. And she craves the past and surrounds herself with things. The stone tape theory that's brought out in Vintage Spin is something that my son told me about. And I have to confess something, Tim, here to your readers. You only have a few readers or listeners, right? They aren't going to tell anyone else.
No, nobody. Yeah.
I have discovered that I am able to do that. Once in a while, I'm able to hold something and pick something up about it. What that object, who had it, what kind of a person. And so that is a real thing for a lot of people.
Oh, yes, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you've talked about that on your show before, but that's not something I knew about 10 years ago. I mean, I probably was able to do that and not totally aware. But yeah, I put some things in the stories that at least I can relate to and let the characters then take it on a journey.
Yes, I'm trying to remember what kind of, let's see, there's clairaudience, clairsentience. I'm trying to remember what type of, and people are going to absolutely rake me over the coals by email for not knowing what that's called. But there's a type of psychic. It's of course it's psychometry. See, I had to go through.
Okay.
It's called psychometry, and it's a very much a psychic gift.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
And again, kind of go back to what we talked about. People. I think people do have abilities that they don't explore or accept, and open their minds to it. Maybe reading these stories will open people's minds to things that, I've always had that fear. I've always had those suspicions. And maybe I actually can do this too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have one story with the so-called dead detective where his ex-wife is able to do readings for people. Mm-hmm. And there's a fun aspect to that, but there's a serious aspect to that. And she warns him, you don't want to play around with this. And yet who hasn't done the Ouija board as a kid?
Right.
That's something that we all oh yeah, I remember doing that. And it was kind of fun and kind of spooky. We scared each other, but
Now
here we are as adults and we're going, maybe.
that story that you're talking about it has an interesting opening, if I may tell people just how that story opens. You
Sure.
open that story with a man who's already passed, but he's waiting in purgatory, which I think is really, really interesting. He's admitted that he slipped up and that his ex has killed him.
Yeah.
Which is,
he knows it, but he wants revenge.
Yeah.
That's the manual for purgatory, because he says that in the first picture. There's no manual for purgatory. I don't know how long I'll be here. I don't know, but and I really like that character. He's funny. He's honest. He admits he really did screw up, and his unlikely connection to solve the murder is his ex-wife that he contacts. So I did have fun with that, but I really liked the characters. Yeah. They're fun. That was a fun one.
Yeah, and I thought that story was amazing, and the fact that he works a little bit, not just as a clue giver to try and solve his own mystery from the other side, which I don't know why more spirits don't do this.
I'll ask him.
Yeah, but if they would, I mean, I've seen it actually. I shouldn't say that doesn't happen, because I've actually sat in a gallery reading, with and I'm trying to remember what the name of the psychic from Iowa is, who's been on the show in the early days. But I sat and watched him in a gallery reading, point out the murderer of this particular spirit who was sitting in the crowd.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was freaky. Yeah. I've seen some things in my day, Gail. But there's but I think if more spirits were to give more clues, and I know with very talented psychics this does happen, where you can have a spirit come forward and drop little clues, or they can show you where their bodies are or whatnot. I mean, there's a lot of talented psychics that work with law enforcement that have done this. But the story that you've put together is clever in that this spirit, is trying to drop hints,
Yeah.
And say,
and some of them are funny.
Yeah, they're very funny.
Because he's not good at it.
No, he's learning the ropes, which I think is, and the way you've had him learn the ropes is very much makes sense with what we know as far as paranormal research goes. Mm-hmm. So it all, you put it together brilliantly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back to what you said though, Tim, why don't spirits leave more clues? Perhaps they do, even not with psychics. Maybe they're leaving clues, but are we looking for them, or are we noticing, or are we just kind of, that's odd? Or, maybe it happens more than we think. True. And more than we realize or accept.
True.
But, I find inspiration kind of just reaching my arms out, lying in bed going, how is this going to end here? How am I getting this guy out of that? Where are the answers coming from? My publisher said from the get-go with the meeting, she said, well, how did you come up with these ideas? She said, they have to come from somewhere. Of course they have to come from somewhere. They come from dreams. They come from experience, even dreams we don't remember. I believe that, Tim. How you wake up, you had a strange dream, but you can't remember. An hour later, it's completely gone. Perhaps there is much that we dream that comes into our lives in different ways, discovering things that we didn't know, solving problems, connecting with people. Something that I call the real vivid dreams, where someone who has passed comes back to you in a dream, and it's like no other dream you have. This person is right in front of your face, speaking to you in such a real way. That it's happening. That's the way, I guess, to look at it. It's happening.
Yeah. I've asked a few other people that have been on this show this question. I'll ask you this question. Do you believe when you're writing that And you've answered part of it, that some of it comes in dreams, some of it comes from other places. But do you believe that when you're on a roll, when things are coming to you clearly, cleanly, do you believe you're writing from here, from a physical mindset, or do you believe you're pulling from a stream of consciousness from somewhere else?
Well, fairly, I have to say both. But sometimes it appears that I am pulling from somewhere else, or it's pulling me. There's something telling me this is the way you have to go here. This is a story that you have to tell, as if it happened. Not all of them, but there are stories and characters in here that I feel really existed on some plane or in the past or part of me. Maybe I've lived other lives. I mean, I'll throw everything out there. It's almost as if I'm being pulled to write something. And so sometimes they leave me alone and I can't write. I have writer's block. But because there were times I struggled with, I don't know, this isn't working this way. Leave it alone for a few days. And then it came to me. And maybe it isn't me. Maybe it's someone or something else that said, now you know which way you're going. So what kind of an answer do you get from some of your other presenters here about it? Do they feel, particularly writers, feel that they've been inspired?
Yeah, no, they for the most part, they feel like especially when things are really rolling, when things feel like it's like when it's really scary, when things are really rolling, they know that they're pulling from a source. From a source of a separate source of consciousness.
Yeah,
that it's not them.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's divine.
Yeah. That muse over your shoulder that you can't see, but it's there.
Yeah, almost like
absolutely.
It's almost like they're getting, the word that's used the most is like they're getting a download. Like it's just like it's being put into them, and then they're just
Which is why we take notes on scraps of paper on our bedside table. Yeah. Because if you leave that to your memory the next morning, you're just blank.
Yeah.
But I have gotten out of bed, not turned the light on, crept in here where I have my desk and scribbled notes, and hopefully I can read them the next morning. It's true. You got to take those inspirations and hold on to them.
Either that or a voice recorder, one or the other. I mean, I've heard voice recorder, I've heard your voice notes on your phone, I've heard scribble, I've heard type, I've heard whatever device you can put it on, right?
That's right.
The voice.
Don't throw those napkins away in the car.
That's right.
They have the plot line on it.
That's right. That's right. One more before we head out today, Gail. You had mentioned it a little bit earlier, but that is the gift of a premonition of the thing that's about to come. There's a story in the book that you had alluded to earlier. There's a group of friends that are meeting in a cafe. They've already lost one good friend. And there's a friend that's returned from Florida, and he's gone to see relatives. And it's alluded to in the book that this friend has the gift of premonition. But he doesn't believe it. He just doesn't seem to believe it. He wants to deny it, but his friends are giving him examples of how, all the way up until, he can't deny it anymore. Is that something you believe all of us have?
All of us. That's a tough question. Perhaps, but I definitely believe that many of us do. I have also talked to people about that. I think it's a little harder to accept that people can know things before they happen. And yet, in dreams, and I had that as a child, I would have dreams about particular people, and then something would happen to them, which is frightening. And, normal people tend to discount things that are not natural. They certainly don't want to talk about it, in everyday conversations or casually. But I do believe that. How do we tap into that? There are ways to do that. But I do. I think premonitions. And his friend also in the story held in those things about him. Well, years ago, I remember, and you said this. We like to tiptoe around uncomfortable conversations that might reveal something about us. And how does religion play into that, or contradict it? How can this be? Are we trying to play God here? Those are difficult questions to just casually discuss. And I think particularly this character, he doesn't want to believe that. He doesn't want to see what ultimately is right in front of him. He even denies when his friend tells him, I can remember when you said this about my grandmother, well, I don't remember that. We push so much back.
Yeah.
And what if we practiced, and there are ways to do that, to bring things forward and actually tap our own skills, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't come from a sense of humility. I think it comes from a sense of, well, I don't want to be the one responsible if something happens, right? I think that's what it is.
Oh, yes. You certainly don't want to tell someone,
right?
I had a dream about you. It looks like you're not going to last through the week. But don't we also pick up things from people that tell us maybe what can happen? There's that thin line of, well, that's his personality, I can see, or he looks ill, but then there are things that we can pick up about a person that he may not be aware of himself. I'm not talking about character traits, I'm talking about things that are going to happen, premonitions. That's a real scary talent or ability.
It can be, although I'll tell you, I'm grateful to a psychic buddy of our show who brought forward my grandmother before I had heart surgery 3 years ago.
Wow.
Who told me just one message from my grandmother, and that was this: if you do the work after the surgery, everything will be fine. Which was just do the work, right? Do the follow-up. If you don't, you'll be in trouble. But if you do the work, everything will be fine. And I followed it like it was gospel, Gail.
Of course, and it did work out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was about the weight of the words, but the weight of the words was such that I felt it in my soul.
Well, perhaps, Tim, it's because you knew it yourself, but you hadn't realized it. So he was perhaps confirming something that you inherently understood. And, I believe that if you have a great interest in those things outside, that realm, you're more sensitive, that you have abilities yourself. And so maybe he was echoing what you had not brought to the forefront. And maybe there's ways that you could do that. How many people do have psychic abilities, don't tap into it, refuse to even believe that exists in anyone else? Like in Voices Carry here, there is a lot of that. Maybe it makes people think about their own experiences. Well, I guess I denied this, but I did kind of know. So
yeah. There's something to be said about keeping your ear to the ground. I think it's ironic in that story that we're talking about that the men in the story are hunters, deer hunters. And
well, it is the UP here, so we're not hunters. And when we first moved here, the only hunting my husband had done was setting mouse traps, and we found out quickly that doesn't count. So I had to be realistic, and there's a lot of me in that man too. So it was interesting to create a character who seemingly very much unlike a girl brought up in Chicago, but yeah.
So let me ask you that. Okay. So I do have one more. So there's there's a story about a husband and a wife who passes away who henpecks the husband throughout her afterlife. Is that based on you and your husband?
Well, he's not in the room, so I guess I can say there are times. I had so much fun with that one. I think everyone can identify with being a little henpecked, or the other way, your husband driving you nuts because he's, eating in his chair and the food's all over, and that was just a fun story. And I think my favorite section of that was when he was in the grocery store and his dead wife starts heckling him from the cereal aisle. I loved being with them. Let's put it that way. Those people were fun to be with.
Yeah, it's a fun story. That's one of my favorites of the book. I can't imagine if that guy's hearing his wife that loud and that clear. I mean, he's either got a guilty conscience or he's that psychic, one or the other. There's got to be an off switch somewhere there. But yeah, that's a great story as well. The book is called Voices Carry Here, Supernatural Stories of Ghosts, Mystery, and Suspense. Gail Galotta is the author of this wonderful book. And folks, we have a link in the description of this program. Go get it. It's right down there. The link is right down there. Go get it. I guarantee you're going to want to read this thing in one sit down. It's the fact of the matter is that the conclusions of these stories, they just fold one into another, and you're just going to want to know the next story and the next story and the next story. And you're going to want to get to know the characters that are in these books because you get hooked. You get hooked and you're going to want to finish the book. You're not going to want to put it down. So, Gail, I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, well, I've just had such a good time. And Tim, it's been a wonderful experience. And thank you so much.
Thank you. It's greatly appreciated. And by all means, if you decide to do another book like this, I want to have you back.
Oh, well, voices carry here, and I'm sure voices will carry again somewhere else. So perhaps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Folks, that'll do it for this week. We're upon the weekend. A couple of things to remind you of before we get out of here today. One, be sure to support the show. Go to darknessradioshow.com. We've got swag up. We've got True Crime Tuesday swag up, like hoodies and I think desk mats. We've got all kinds of things up there, hoodies, hats, and whatnot. Also, Darkness Radio show merchandise as well. There's brand new hats. I believe there's an anniversary hat, 20th anniversary hat as well up there. Also, the Darkness Radio Apple app is updated, ready for you for iOS 26. Be sure to download that or update it if you haven't updated it already. Let's see what else. I know there's something I'm forgetting. I know I'm a little behind on videos right now if you're on the YouTube page, but just be patient with me. That should be caught up this weekend. And also, the weather's been a little funky. I know that it's been cold out, it's been warm out, it's been cold out, it's been warm out, but there is some spring cleanup to do. By all means, please be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. Go help someone who is elderly or disabled in your community. Get out there and help them with spring cleanup, whether it be indoors or outdoors. I know I'm going to get out there and help this weekend. And plus, it's Mother's Day weekend. So if there's someone in your community who is maybe by themselves and needs some love and care this weekend, who is maybe a mother or an aunt or a mother figure in your community who needs a little brightening in their day, go be a light in their darkness. Maybe bring by some flowers or a card or something. A message from your buddies here at Darkness Radio. For Mally Fox, for Jessica Freeberg, for Beer City Bruiser, for Travis Thorpe, I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you so much for continuing to listen and watch the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio.